The woman had been dead for 7 days and 7 nights, yet they still needed to find a young man to enter the bridal chamber with her to complete an eerie ghost marriage. The young man knew he was facing a spine-chilling situation, yet he still gritted his teeth and agreed to share a room with the undecomposed woman, only because his wife was gravely ill in the hospital, fighting death every minute and every second. The astronomical surgery fees loomed like a mountain, crushing him until he could barely breathe. When he had nowhere else to turn, his good friend brought him news. There was a big job worth $500,000. This money was the lifeline his wife desperately needed. The young man followed his friend without hesitation. Upon arriving at the doorway, he froze in shock. The courtyard was draped with white cloth. The funeral arrangements stung his eyes when the young man learned that the so-called big job was actually marrying the recently deceased daughter of his employer in a ghost wedding. His first reaction was disbelief, followed by surging anger. Who could accept such an absurd proposition? He immediately prepared to leave. In that moment of turning away, the image of his weak wife on her hospital bed flashed before his eyes. On one side was his revulsion toward this preposterous arrangement. On the other was the urgency of saving his wife. Eventually his love and responsibility for his wife prevailed. The employer seemingly anticipated his hesitation, immediately pulled out $50,000 as a deposit. As the young man reached for the money, the employer suddenly grabbed his hand, asked a strange question, surprisingly asking if he was a virgin, adding that without this qualification there would be no payment. The young man quickly pulled his friend aside to question him. His friend explained that the employer specifically required a married virgin. He happened to fit the criteria, which is why he was brought here. Under the persuasion of both his employer and friend, the young man reluctantly had no choice but to steel himself and agree. Subsequently, 2 elderly people led him to a room. Just as he was noting the bridal room decorations, the elderly people disappeared without a trace. The door locked with a click, leaving him alone to face the bride with her red veil, who had been dead for 7 days. The air in the sealed room seemed to freeze. It was so quiet he could hear his heart pounding. He summoned his courage and slowly reached out, lifting the bride's red veil. Before his eyes appeared a young and beautiful face. The young man could not help but be surprised. He first lifted the red quilt, then removed the bride's red shoes. Just as the eerie atmosphere was making him increasingly agitated, suddenly a shadow passed by outside the door. The young man rushed to open it, only to discover the bride's parents eavesdropping. Before he could question them, they explained they were worried about his stamina and had specially prepared a bowl of nourishing soup. Saying this, they forced it into his mouth, maliciously reminding him to take it easy. The young man returned to the room full of doubts, looking at the bride lying quietly on the bed. He could not help but sigh at her tragic fate. As night fell, the young man began to feel strange. He knew clearly, only by completing this absurd ceremony could he get the remaining money to save his wife. So he gritted his teeth and lay down beside the bride, finally resolving the moral and practical struggle. But when he reached out to undress the girl, unexpectedly the girl woke up.